In 1989, if you bought a Dodge truck, you didn't buy it for the ride quality. You bought it because you wanted to pull a house. While Ford and Chevy were building comfortable cruisers with weak, non-turbo V8s, Dodge was desperate, so they did something unhinged. They took a massive industrial engine, the legendary 12-valve Cummins turbo diesel, straight out of a case tractor, and shoved it into a chassis that hadn't changed since Nixon was president. Engineers literally had to use sledgehammers on the firewall just to make it fit. And when this rattling first-gen Dodge lined up against the Ford 7.3 IDI, the war was over. The Ford choked on smoke, the Dodge whistled and pulled. This is the story of the 1989 Dodge Ram, the industrial monster that humiliated the competition and saved Chrysler. While Chevy unveiled the GMT 400 and Ford was printing money with the F-150, Dodge was still selling a truck from 1972, 16 years. Same body, same flat windshield, same dashboard that looked like it came straight out of a hardware store. If you bought a new Dodge Ram in 1988, you were driving Nixon-era sheet metal. Sales had tanked to 4% of the market. Ford and Chevy weren't just winning. They'd already divided up the kingdom. Dodge was the forgotten stepchild nobody wanted, and Chrysler? Broke. Again. Lee Iacocca had saved them once with minivans and K-cars, but the truck division was a money pit they couldn't afford to fix. Here's the thing. To compete, they needed a diesel. GM had the 6.2-liter Detroit. Ford had the 7.3-liter IDI, but building a new diesel V8 from scratch costs hundreds of millions and takes years. Dodge had neither. Then somebody at Chrysler noticed something. They had business ties with Tenneco, the company that owned Case Farm equipment and Case tractors. They ran Cummins engines, big, heavy-duty, straight-six diesels designed for combines and bulldozers. Some engineer walked past one of those tractors, heard it idling, and thought, what if we just stick that thing in a pickup? It was insane. It was desperate. But when you're about to drown, you don't care if the life preserver is ugly. You grab it. The Cummins 6BT wasn't designed for your Saturday morning coffee run. It was built to pull plows through frozen dirt and power irrigation pumps in the middle of nowhere. 5.9 liters, inline 6, not a V8, a straight 6 that sat in the engine bay like a telephone pole. And here's where it got interesting. It had a turbocharger, a Holset H1C fixed geometry turbo that forced air into the cylinders, whether the engine wanted it or not. Ford's 7.3-liter, naturally aspirated, no turbo. Chevy's 6.2-liter Detroit, same story. They were sucking air like asthmatics on a treadmill. But the Cummins, it was force-fed. The other killer advantage? Direct injection. Ford and Chevy were still using indirect injection, pre-combustion chambers that were slow, inefficient, and weak. The Cummins fired fuel straight into the cylinder. Harder hit, more power, better fuel economy. And the number that really mattered? 400 pound-feet of torque. At just 1,400 RPM, you barely touched the throttle, and the truck pulled like a freight train. Now here's the part the old-timers love. Fitting this monster into the Ram was a nightmare. The engine weighed over 1,100 pounds, wet. Rumor says engineers had to take sledgehammers to the firewall just to clear the block. They reinforced the frame rails because the front end was so nose-heavy. The stock setup would have buckled. It wasn't elegant, it wasn't pretty, but when you turned the key and heard that diesel clatter settle into a low, throbbing idle, you knew you weren't driving a truck anymore. You were driving a piece of farm equipment with license plates. And here's where Dodge made Ford and Chevy look like they showed up to a gunfight with cap guns. The competition in 1989, Ford's 7.3-liter IDI V8, 185 horsepower, 338 pound-feet of torque, no turbo. Chevy's 6.2-liter Detroit, V8, 130 horsepower, 240 pound-feet of torque, no turbo. Dodge's 5.9-liter Cummins, 160 horsepower, 400 pound-feet of torque, turbocharged. On paper, the horsepower didn't look impressive, but torque? That's what moves weight. And the Cummins had more torque than both of them. Now picture this. You're towing a 10,000-pound trailer up a mountain pass, 6% grade, 5,000 feet of elevation. The Ford and Chevy, they're choking. Naturally aspirated engines lose about 3% of their power for every 1,000 feet of altitude. At 5,000 feet, they're gasping for oxygen. Black smoke pouring out of the exhaust, doing maybe 35 miles per hour in second gear, pedal flat to the floor. Then the Dodge rolls past, doing 55 miles per hour. Why? The turbo. It doesn't care about thin air. It's forcing oxygen into the cylinders whether the atmosphere cooperates or not. The Ford driver watches you disappear up the hill and realizes his so-called heavy-duty diesel just got walked by a truck with a tractor motor. That's the humiliation. And here's the kicker. While Ford and Chevy diesels needed rebuilds at around 200,000 miles, the Cummins was a medium-duty industrial engine. 300,000 miles wasn't the end. It was just getting broken in. The engine that was supposed to save Dodge didn't just compete, it dominated. But here's the part nobody tells you. The engine was a 10 out of 10. The rest of the truck? Maybe a 3. Let's start with the transmission. The early models, 1989 to 1991, came with the 727 Torque Flight, a 3-speed automatic, no overdrive. You heard that right, 3 gears in 1989. Now bolt that to 4.10 rear gears and try driving on the highway. The Cummins is screaming at near redline just to hold 65 miles per hour. The fuel economy you were promised? Gone. The engine's bellowing like an angry bull, and you're watching the temperature gauge climb. If you ordered the 5-speed manual, the Getrag G360, you got overdrive, but you also got a transmission that needed to be overfilled with an extra 1 quart of oil just to survive. Ask any first-gen owner, they'll tell you. And the ride? Empty. That truck was punishing. The Cummins weighed 1,100 pounds up front. The suspension wasn't designed for it. Hit a pothole, and your spine compressed 2 inches. The body wasn't much better. The cab corners rusted if you looked at them wrong. The drip rails above the doors? Rot magnets. By 1995, 6-year-old trucks looked like they'd been dredged from a lake. The paint peeled, the seats tore, the dashboard cracked in the first summer. But you know what? Nobody cared, because when you needed to pull a loaded gooseneck trailer through a blizzard at 2 a.m., that Cummins fired up on the first crank and dragged you home. The truck fell apart around the engine. But the engine never quit. Every first-gen Cummins owner knows about the KDP. If you don't, you're about to learn why it haunts your dreams. KDP stands for Killer Dowel Pin. It's a tiny steel alignment pin about the size of your pinky nail that sits inside the timing gear case. Its job? Hold the front gear cover in place during assembly. Sounds harmless, right? Here's the problem. Vibration. The Cummins shakes. It's an inline-6 diesel with a lot of torque and a lot of reciprocating mass. Over time, that vibration works the dowel pin loose. And when it comes loose, it falls right into the spinning timing gears. The gears chew it up, spit metal shavings through the oil, and crack the timing case. Now you're looking at a catastrophic failure. Engine rebuild, thousands of dollars, all because of a 50-cent piece of metal. And here's the worst part. Dodge knew, Cummins knew, but they didn't fix it from the factory until later years. So what do? You tab it. You pull the timing cover, drill a small hole, and install a little metal tab that locks the dowel pin in place. It takes an afternoon and costs maybe $20. But if you don't, you're gambling every time you turn the key. Ask any 12-valve guy, did you tab your KDP? If they say no, they're either lying or living on borrowed time. It's the one modification you do before anything else. Before lift pumps, before injectors, before turning up the fuel screw, you tab the KDP or you walk. Mid-1991. Dodge finally admitted the truck needed help. They couldn't redesign the body, that would take years, and money they still didn't have. But they could fix the biggest complaints, heat and gearing. Enter the intercooler. The 1989 to 1991 trucks were non-intercooled. The turbo compressed air, which made it hot. Hot air is less dense. Less dense air means less power. And higher engine temps under load. The 1991 update added an air-to-air intercooler mounted in front of the radiator. Now the compressed air from the turbo got cooled before it hit the engine. Denser air, more oxygen, more power, lower temps. Horsepower jumped to 175, torque stayed at 400 pounds-feet, but it pulled cleaner and cooler, and finally, they gave it the A518 4-speed automatic with overdrive. No more screaming down the highway at 3,200 RPM. You could cruise at 65 miles per hour without the engine sounding like it was about to grenade. They also swapped the grille. The classic egg crate design gave way to the crosshair grille, the one that became iconic on later 12-valve trucks. Did it fix the rust? No. Did it make the ride comfortable? Not really. The cab still rattled, the doors still sagged, and the paint still peeled. But the engine and the drivetrain? Now they were dialed in. The 1991.5 to 93 intercooled 12-valve, it's the sweet spot. Mechanical injection, no electronics, overdrive transmission, intercooled power. It's the one they all want, and the one that's nearly impossible to find clean. Here's what the 1989 Dodge Ram with the Cummins really did. It changed the entire diesel truck market. Before 1989, diesel pickups were work trucks, slow, loud, smoky. Things farmers bought because they lasted forever and ran on cheap fuel. Nobody wanted one. You tolerated it. After the Cummins, people started buying diesels for performance. Suddenly, diesel wasn't the penalty box, it was the upgrade. Dodge proved you could have power, torque, and reliability all in one package. The truck became a status symbol, and Ford noticed. By 1994, Ford was scrambling. They ran to Navistar and begged them to build the 7.3-liter Power Stroke, a turbocharged, direct-injection diesel that could compete with the Cummins. Chevy followed with the Duramax in 2001. The entire modern diesel truck war, the one that's still raging today, started because Dodge stuffed a tractor motor into a 1970s body and embarrassed the Big Two. Chrysler's truck sales exploded. By the mid-90s, they weren't just surviving, they were thriving. The Ram became profitable. The Cummins became legendary. Today, a rusty 1990 W250 four-wheel drive with 300,000 miles sells for $15,000 to $20,000. Not because the body's worth anything, it's usually held together with prayer and bondo. Because of the engine. The 12-valve Cummins outlived the truck it came in. The doors fell off, the bed rotted, the frame cracked. But that engine? Still running, still pulling. Still worth more than most new compact cars. That's the legacy. So here's the final word on the 1989 Dodge Ram. The body fell apart, the paint peeled off in sheets, the seats tore, the cab corners dissolved into rust dust, the dashboard cracked, the doors sagged on their hinges. But that Cummins never stopped running. You could neglect it, you could abuse it, you could tow twice what the truck was rated for, run it low on oil, and forget to change the fuel filter for 50,000 miles, and it would still fire up on the first crank. That's why these trucks are worth more dead than most new trucks are alive. That's why guys pull the Cummins out of a rotted frame and drop it into anything with four wheels. Jeeps, Fords, even Chevys. Because steel rusts, bodies rot, electronics fail. But a 12-valve Cummins, that thing just keeps going. The Cummins swap, a Cummins in a Ford body, is practically a religion now. Dodge saved Chrysler by accident. They weren't chasing legacy. They weren't trying to start a revolution. They were just trying to survive. They grabbed the cheapest solution they could find, bolted it together with hope and heavy-duty bolts, and sent it out the door. And somehow, it worked. So here's my question for you. If you found a clean first-gen Dodge Ram today, original paint, straight body, running 12-valve, would you keep it stock and preserve it? Or would you yank that Cummins and build a Cummins? Be honest. Drop your answer in the comments. I want to know. And if you've ever owned a first-gen, tell me, what finally killed it? The rust? The frame? Or did you sell it and regret it every day since? I'll see you in the next one.